Hello there beautiful, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now in today's video we should have a nice shorter video today, given how long the previous one was and how big the event was with DET9, as this week we're going to be covering Edge's intertwined wills, or intersecting wills. And this one should be a lot easier. We only actually have one character to cover with this particular event because this was where Garnet originally placed in JP, but we obviously already have her with some additions that they didn't get back there. So if you'd like to learn more about Edge and the event that comes with him, then stay tuned and keep on watching. Of course, before we get started, don't forget to check out all of my social media links down below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon. If you fancy joining in with various discussions based on Opera Omnia, Final Fantasy in general, all sorts of other video games as well, then consider coming and joining in with our very welcoming Discord community, all linked down below. Over on Patreon, I do always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a brand new video, and today that person is going to be Winged Paragon, who has Golbez as their title card and has been a supporter for quite some time now. So a massive thank you goes out to you and to all of my other patrons, and if you would like a title card just like this one, made just for you, as well as lots of other benefits, perhaps consider clicking on the link in the description box below and supporting the channel further. And with Twitch, obviously, I do stream every Dissidia event as it goes live, and I will be switching up my schedule for things unrelated to Dissidia Opera Omnia, as we're going to be doing a bit more of the regular Final Fantasy games now that we're going to be doing the Platinum hunting, so do stay tuned as well for that and the changes to the schedule as they come about. And of course, don't forget to check out all of the other content creators and resources out there for Dissidia Opera Omnia, as they all deserve your love too. So now let's go ahead and go and take a look at the banner, and weirdly we actually only really have one character to talk about today, because the banner as it is in JP is going to feature Edge, his brand new LD and the rest of his gear, Garnet and her LD as a returning weapon, no BT for her though sadly here, and then Vincent getting his BT weapon again, and Eb7 being there with her EX for Power Stone purposes I suppose, and Chaos challenges. So while Garnet is on this banner, this is where she originally came out in JP with her LD. Now bear in mind that the BT is global exclusive at this point in time, so we don't have anything new when it comes to Garnet. In fact, our version of Garnet, even without the BT, is better than what Garnet was when she came out at this point in JP, because we get skill recoveries from her LD, which is actually quite relevant to King's event as we approach that as well. But suffice to say, if you don't already have Garnet, she's definitely still very, very good. Bear in mind again, with her release on JP, she was considered really good even at this point, even though we're going into Shinryu era. And we have way more on Garnet than this, so if you don't have her LD already, or even her BT, it's not a waste to consider picking up her BT with tokens if you get her LD here as well, because she will still do good things in Shinryu era as well. If you don't want to though, you don't have to. There are other characters that you can play, and going into Shinryu era you may want to consider saving for those instead. All I'm saying is that Garnet is still very, very powerful, like above and beyond most other characters in the game, and she's still going to be very good for quite some time. So instead, let's take a look at Edge. So Edge, if you've not used him before, has a lot of thunder-based attacks and the ability to provide 100% evasion for himself and his party through his EX. And he doesn't largely change all that much when it comes to his base kit. His rework makes it so that Shock, which is his regular just attacking move, has 3 HP, dumps on it with splash damage, which is fine. It's nothing crazy damage-wise, but it's okay. And then Smokescreen, which is 1 turn of lock to all enemies, and then 3 HP dumps on his thunder-based attack, and he has 100% evasion up for 6 turns after he uses it, although the lock only lasts for 1 turn, so that's worth bearing in mind. And then his EX, his Blitz Mirage, gives him his offensive buffs, which provides a little bit of attack for the party, and actually gives you 2 turns of Mirage, which is an AoE 100% evasion for the entire party. Now you do have to be careful with this, because obviously the Mirage is attached to Edge as a buff, and Edge is a very quick character, so you have to time this very well if you want to get the absolute most out of it. Thunderburst is his AA, which gives him max Brave damage cap and attack up, as well as being a Brave HP attack that he can use himself, just to throw out there if you want the free turn. And then his LD, which is brand new, is going to shift him aside slightly so that he's dealing fire and thunder damage and imperiling both of them, which is very nice. And the attack itself is literally just a 4 HP dumping full AoE damage attack. That's pretty much it, and it gives you the fire and thunder resist down, and it's a quick attack. What it does give you, however, is a special effect which is added to Edge, which is Fire Scarf. Fire Scarf is a special effect much like Balthier in that it doesn't disappear, it just goes up, and it just goes up in stacks, and in some cases down, like Edge's will do. And it goes up every time he evades an attack. So when you get when you go to evade an attack, you get a counter which is a double AoE, full AoE HP dumping attack, and that will increase his Fire Scarf by 1, and then when he hits 2, it will do double that. So it does 4 HP dumps instead of 2, and then it will go back down to 0 again so that you're building up. So Edge can actually deal a lot of damage when used effectively, when used correctly. And what is very nice is the fact that he has Thunder as his primary element, as that often means that in FR era there are lots of very thunder heavy FR weapons such as Cryals or Renos. Renos in particular is worth mentioning here because it relies on off-turn damage and enemies taking turns, which Edge really laps up and does very well with. He has some nice party benefits like the Fire Scarf actually gives you a little bit of HP damage up, Brave damage up, 50% Brave damage up as well. And he makes it so that he's getting retained bravery when he uses HP attacks as well. So he does churn out a lot of damage if you want him to. The thing is that you also have access to characters like Galoof and Auron, which are more dedicated counter tanks, evade and counter tanks, which, depending on how you're building around, can not necessarily do more damage than Edge does. I mean, Galoof in certain situations can. If you're against a physical heavy enemy, Galoof's quadruple HP dumps on his counters do a lot, but they provide a lot more to the party outside of damage as well as being an evading counter tank, such as HP regen. In the case of Auron, you have debuffs like Full Break. Edge doesn't do any of that. But what he does do is a lot of damage in a short space of time. He's able to give a full AoE evasion with his EX, and he can capitalize on those evasions with his new counters. You just need to make sure you're using him in a place where his application is most effective, because he's not someone you can just throw into a party and get everything out of like you could Galoof, Gladio, Auron, that kind of thing, cover tanks, evade tanks, anything like that. He's not actually a tank. And his damage outside of his counters, and again, generally speaking, you'll want to take him to fights where there's lots of enemies attacking very frequently, isn't all that high. Shock is triple HP dump, Smokescreen is triple HP dump, Blitz, Mirage, and Inferno are both quadruple HP dumps, but they're not damage dealer numbers. Like, I mean, we're looking at Sephiroth and Prish and stuff like that that have 8, 12 ridiculous numbers of HP dumps, even Garnet. And he doesn't do that, but he can be used very effectively if built around correctly. Okay, so now let's take a look at Edge's Intersecting Wills, which is the event that's going to be coming along with him. So, once again, a massive shout out to DissidiaCompendium.com for this information, and of course Leo, Bob, and Midiu for their translations on Reddit for the characters as well. So we're going to be fighting the CPU from Final Fantasy IV. I am actually wearing the FF4 t-shirt, by the way, but because I've got a long chest, it's kind of just not showing it at all. But never mind. So against these guys, the biggest thing you have to worry about realistically is the Lufenia orb itself, which is fatal on like counting down to 0. And there are 3 methods of getting around it, but you're going to want to employ them all realistically because the orb ticks down by 4 every time the player acts. So you can slow this down in your turns, but the enemy is going to need to take turns, and you're going to need to evade attacks in order to really keep on top of it. So you can deal Thunder Brave damage, and this only increases it by 1, so it slows it down a little bit. You can deal HP damage to all enemies in 1 turn. Now, this bit was actually bugged when it was released in JP and didn't work, so hopefully that isn't the case for us, but just as an FYI, that did happen in JP. And finally, it goes to maximum if you evade an attack. So obviously you have plenty of ways of dealing with those. Garnet, certainly in our incarnation, lots of people have Garnet. We'll absolutely make mincemeat out of this particular event. And one thing that is quite interesting, if you don't necessarily want to bring a character that evades the enemy attacks, such as Edge or Galoof or anything like that, you can actually bring Freya or Kain along, have them be up in the air. You could use a lock ability or a call ability for those to, but that's not going to last very long. But what's interesting is that there's certain moves like Garnet's battery from her follow-up, from her arc follow-up, or Sellers' ice traps that I've seen, and you can actually use those as batteries. Shout out to Alphino Levire's channel actually for showing me this. Where you can evade the battery that you got from those follow-ups, and that counts towards the orb. So that's a very odd way of going about it, but it can work if you don't necessarily want to take a actual evasion unit. But typically you'll take somebody like Galoof or Edge or something like that. Now, you also have to bear in mind that the mechanics of the fight itself actually aren't that difficult. However, the order in which you destroy the enemies is going to be relevant. Normally, you would blow up the nodes, the attack and defense nodes, before you blow up the CPU itself, because otherwise bad things would happen. But in this case, it's the other way around, because if you beat up the nodes before the boss, he dispels your party and resurrects them, so you have to kill them again. And then the attack node is just throwing out HP attacks constantly, and the defense node is healing the attack node constantly. And if that one's already been defeated, he then moves on to healing the boss instead. So what you realistically want to do is beat up the CPU, then the defense node, then the attack node. So that way he's not then healing himself constantly and just making things way, way longer and harder for yourself. But in terms of the actual fight itself, you have to just deal with a lot of defense. And like it does, you just hit it hard, hit it fast, and other than that, it'll be fine. It's a lot easier than DET9, I can tell you that much. So now let's dive into Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let your voice be heard and tell everybody whether you would pull on this banner and why, or maybe not. And so, big thank you, of course, to all of my patrons for casting their votes and their comments. It's as valuable as ever. So, of the 100+ people that we asked, let's go into some numbers. 8% of people said that we're going to use gems here. 60% said that we're going to use 100 or more tickets. 20% said less than 100 tickets. And 12% said that they weren't interested. Me, personally, again, much like most of the banners that we've had recently, I'm between the 100+, less than 100. I have quite a lot of tickets at the moment, so I have to use them somewhere, and I would like to pick up Edge. I think his use with Thunder-based FRs later down the line could be very useful, and it just would be nice to have. Am I absolutely gunning for him, though? If only for the costume. That costume is badass. So let's go ahead and look at some comments. Nalthian says Edge turns into an evade and counter unit, and I'm pretty excited about this approach. It really helps give him an identity where he's perhaps a bit more offensive than Galoof or Auron while still providing some party protection. I'll throw tickets since I'm still more likely to use the other two, since I'm good with a more defensive playstyle, but if you want that more offensive posture, he's solid. I have Garnet's full kit. However, if they make her BT available as well and you don't have Garnet LD and BT, she's probably still the strongest unit in the game leading up to the FR era, and I actually think she'll have some longevity there as well. One of the things that I found very interesting actually is that a lot of the people that were voting yes on this banner were actually gunning for Garnet, not Edge. Of course, with Garnet having been released before, there is every chance that they might change that banner, but I think it would be a really good opportunity for people who perhaps missed out on her the first time round to grab her now, because even with just her LD, she's still pretty fierce, and it's like one of those situations where you could go, maybe I could throw some BT tokens at her, because then I'd have access to her, or maybe you'd rather save them for characters in the FR era that perhaps have a BT and an FR. Having the options available is always nice though. So Alex says, I honestly don't really care about Edge. I plan on using Seiss and his Lufenia for the evasion, and I don't see myself ever opting for him outside of CA needs. I'll throw a few tickets for collection purposes, and that's about it. However, if you don't have Garnet and she's actually on the banner, I'd still advise pulling and getting her kit if you can afford tokening her BT, because she's still outstanding, and I'm sure she'll shine in this early Shinryu as well. So yes, very similar comments here. Like, people are more fussed by Garnet than by Edge, whereas I do think that Edge does have a lot to offer for a very particular type of playstyle. So if you're looking at Reno FR in particular, perhaps consider pulling for Edge, because those two would be a match made in heaven. And then finally, J-Dog says, I don't have Edge and he doesn't really add anything new to my roster. I also have Garnet's full kit. This is the perfect time to say, so I'll be banking the summon boards and ingots for the upcoming FR banner. So yeah, a lot of people aren't throwing their stuff at Garnet, not at Edge, which is very interesting. And like I said, without repeating myself, I do think that if you have a very particular type of playstyle, which is sort of evade and counter with an offensive kind of twinge, then I would suggest perhaps looking at Edge. So now for the big question, of course. Do I think that you should be pulling for Edge or Garnet? Now, Garnet is still a phenomenal character to this day, and even if her BT isn't available on this banner, she still functions without it. Like, her LD is still good, and considering that she never had a BT in JP, or the ability to recover skills with her LD, which is actually relevant for King's Event, as I said earlier, then, you know, she was still considered good in JP, so she's still pretty good now if you don't already have her. But in order to really get the most out of her for the future, etc., you're probably gonna want to have her BT, so if you don't have it already, you'd have to then spend BT tokens on getting it, which isn't a desirable thing for many players, particularly if you're saving up for somebody like Kayn or Camlanor or Luna Freya even, or Charlotta. There's lots of characters coming out in the future whose BTs are very, very good as well. That's not to say that Garnet would be a waste of your BT tokens. She absolutely wouldn't. She's still one of the best characters, if not the single best character in the game right now. And she has been for the past, what, 4 months? It's crazy. But that's up to you as to whether you'd be willing to spend those tokens. Me personally, I probably wouldn't, but that's down to the fact that I'd like to kind of keep my stuff aside for newer things as they arrive, because I find that more exciting personally. But again, it's up to you. Edge caters to a very particular playstyle and does it his way very well. Now, you have other sort of evade-based units, like I've mentioned Galoof and Auron. Auron hasn't had his C90 update yet, but he will get it in the next month or so we don't have long to wait for that. And both of them are proper evade-based tanks, which means they have cover, they have defensive properties like HP regens, damage taken down. In the case of Auron, he has his debuffs, etc. There are things that they provide that are more universal than what Edge does. Now, Edge also doesn't have the greatest on-turn damage or, like I said, supportive benefits that he could do to be your primary role within your party for either of those things, but he does make an exceptionally good evade player when using his EX to evade certain things, because there are a lot more bosses in Shinryu era that have evadable big attacks than you might think, so having access to Edge might be really nice. And you just have to be careful with the timing on that, because Edge is a fast character and you only have 2 turns of Mirage. You might want to be careful of that. However, the fact that his EX has its recast rate increased now thanks to his C90 does benefit that greatly. Would I go all in on him? I don't know. It depends entirely on what your playstyle is. If you're really looking at Thunder-based FRs, and there are quite a few of them, Dash, Kryl, don't go for Dash, Kryl, Reno, that kind of thing, then yeah, I probably would look at picking him up. Certainly in the case of Reno, and a lot of people really love Reno FR, and I have to say, the more I look into it, the more excited I am for it as well. So for that reason, I'd quite like to pick up Edge, but by no means is he a mandatory pull. So that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you ever so much for joining me today, and don't forget to come and join me on Friday morning over on Twitch, where I'll be covering this event and hopefully getting myself an Edge LD along the way. And that's going to be it for me today, so don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and of course don't forget to comment and let us all know whether you're pulling for Edge or Garnet, or whether you think other people should do the same. Maybe there are some interactions that I haven't spoken about on this video that you think you'd like to come to light, in which case leave a comment below or come and join us on Discord and join the discussion there. But for now, I shall leave you there. Thank you ever so much, beautiful, and I'll see you next time. Take care.